There's a place in Nevada where the desert meets silence. No wind, no movement, just the sound of metal fences catching the first light of dawn. Inside one of those fences, a young lynx named Kai lay in the corner of his cage. Too weak to growl, too proud to beg. He had 48 hours left to live. The papers were signed, the decision made. He would be euthanized, not because he was sick, but because there was no one left to take him. And that morning, the woman who came to see him wasn't coming to save him. She was coming to sign the end. Elena Brooks had spent 22 years working with wild animals. Foxes, owls, cougars, you name it. She'd seen more endings than beginnings, and this time she told herself, you can't save them all. The metal gate squeaked as she walked toward the quarantine pen. The air smelled of rust and disinfectant. A young keeper walked beside her, eyes tired. He's the last one, he said quietly. We found homes for the others, but no one will take him, not this one. Elena nodded, but she didn't look up. She didn't want to. She already knew what that look felt like, but when she finally did, when her eyes met his, something stopped her. Kai's eyes weren't angry. They weren't even afraid. They were empty. The kind of emptiness that only comes when you've stopped hoping. And in that emptiness, she saw something she recognized. Years ago, she had rescued another lynx, same age, same fear, and watched it die from stress just days later. She swore she'd never go through that again. Never let her heart get attached, but now here she was, standing in front of another broken creature, and her heart betrayed her. That night she sat alone in her small desert cabin. The clock ticked past midnight, coffee gone cold. Her phone on the table, its contact list filled with names of people who all said the same thing. Sorry, Elena, we're full. Behavioral case, insurance won't cover it. Try New Mexico. Maybe next season. She tried New Mexico, then Utah, then California, same silence, same answer. Outside, the desert stretched endless and silver under the moon. Somewhere out there, wild lynxes roamed free, their paws soft on the sand. Their eyes bright, living the lives they were born for. Kai would never have that. Born in a cage, sold illegally as a pet, confiscated when he became too wild to handle. Every step of his life had been someone else's mistake. Elena closed her laptop, rubbed her eyes, and whispered to the empty room, I can't save them all. But then she remembered the way he had looked at her, not angry, not pleading, just quietly waiting for someone to show up. And for some reason she couldn't explain, she knew she had to be that someone. The next morning, she was back at the facility before sunrise. The director was in his office, half asleep over paperwork. He didn't even look up when she walked in. Elena, he sighed, I already told you, I'll take him. That made him look up. What? I'll take Kai. Elena, he's not a release candidate. You know what that means. He'll never go back to the wild. I know, this is a lifetime commitment. I know. He stared at her for a long moment, searching for doubt, but there wasn't any. You're really going to do this, she nodded. Because if I don't, no one will. By sunset, she was reinforcing the old enclosure behind her sanctuary, an empty space that once held another bobcat who'd been set free last spring. She built new platforms, added shaded corners, even laid soft sand from the dry riverbed nearby. Everything had to be ready. 2 days later, just 18 hours before Kai's euthanasia deadline, he was sedated, placed in a crate, and loaded into the back of her truck. Elena drove with the windows cracked, the desert wind whispering through. She kept the radio off, only the steady sound of tires against gravel. The journey took 2 hours, but in her heart, it felt like crossing a lifetime. When they arrived, the sun was setting, turning the Nevada mountains gold and purple. As the sedative wore off, Kai stepped out slowly, cautious, uncertain, his pupils wide as he took in the new world around him. It wasn't freedom. But it was the first time he'd seen sky without bars. For the first week, Elena didn't try to touch him, didn't even speak. She just sat by his enclosure, 15 feet away, reading, writing, sometimes just breathing the same air. Kai watched her constantly, his ears twitching, muscles tense. Every movement she made sent ripples through his body like thunder, but she stayed, quiet, patient, present, and slowly something began to change. By day 7, his breathing slowed. He started resting in the sun instead of hiding. By day 10, something miraculous happened. Elena was eating lunch outside the fence, an apple, a sandwich, a notebook full of scribbles. When she stood to leave, the apple rolled off the table, bumping softly against the wire fence. Kai's eyes followed it. He tilted his head, curious. Then, for the first time, he moved toward her. Elena froze, not wanting to scare him. She rolled the apple gently under the fence. Kai sniffed it, then began to bat it around with his paw, clumsy, awkward, like a cub discovering play for the first time. Elena sat down again, smiling through tears she didn't expect. That single moment, a fallen apple, a flicker of trust, was worth every sleepless night. Weeks turned into months. Kai gained weight. His coat began to shine again under the desert sun. He started eating full meals, stretching across the platform she'd built, watching the world not with fear but with curiosity. But not everything was easy. One afternoon, during a routine check, a state inspector arrived unexpectedly. He frowned as Kai paced behind her. "Mrs. Brooks," he warned, "if that animal ever injures staff, you'll lose your license permanently." Elena met his gaze. "I understand," she did. But she also knew that fear had never saved anything worth saving. By the 6th month, Kai had learned to respond to her voice. Not tamely, never that, but with awareness. He'd come when she called, touch his nose to a target stick. Allow her to check his paws through the safety panel. Each success was rewarded with his favorite treat, quail. Dr. Emerson, the wildlife vet who'd examined him during the seizure, stood beside her one afternoon watching. "I can't believe this is the same Lynx," she whispered. "When I saw him last, he was completely shut down." Elena smiled. "So was I." They both laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that comes from healing more than one heart at a time. A year passed. One morning, Elena invited 3 senior students from the University of Nevada, wildlife biology majors, to observe Kai. It was their first field experience. The 3 sat silently near the fence as Elena spoke. "Every animal here has a story. Kai's is about survival, not against nature, but against human failure." Kai approached the fence, his golden eyes studying the new faces. He wasn't afraid, just curious. "This," Elena continued, "is what happens when we forget that loving something wild doesn't mean we should own it." When the session ended, one student lingered behind. "Miss Brooks," she asked, "what would have happened if you hadn't taken him?" Elena turned toward the enclosure. Kai had climbed onto his platform, stretching in the sun. "He'd be another statistic," she said softly. "A healthy life lost because it didn't fit in our system." 2 more years went by. Kai became part of the sanctuary's rhythm, his presence steady, familiar. He was never tame, but he was at peace. Then one morning the phone rang. It was Dr. Rodriguez from the Sonoran Wildlife Center. "Elena," she said, "I know this is unusual, but we have a young female lynx, captive-born, failed her reintroduction attempt. She's social with other lynxes. Would you consider trying a paired enclosure with Kai?" Elena hesitated. Kai had been solitary for so long. Bobcats and lynxes were territorial by nature. But lately, she'd noticed him pacing more, making low chirping calls, restless, searching for something. "Send me her history," Elena said finally. "Let's see." 2 weeks later, Luna arrived. Smaller, younger, a little wild spark in her amber eyes. Elena divided the large enclosure with a temporary fence, visual and scent contact only. No physical interaction. Not yet. The reaction was immediate. Kai didn't snarl, didn't hide. He chirped, a soft, rumbling sound of curiosity. Luna responded in kind, lying down close to the divider. Their eyes met through the fence. No aggression, just interest. 6 weeks later, after careful observation, Elena and her team removed the barrier. They stood ready, hoses in hand, boards nearby, prepared for violence. The 2 lynxes approached each other slowly. One step, then another. They stopped. For a long heartbeat, neither moved. The tension was unbearable. Then Luna leaned forward and rubbed her head against Kai's neck. Elena exhaled, tears blurring her vision. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. Within minutes, the 2 were lying side by side, the sun catching the soft gold of their coats. 3 years after the day she found him, Elena stood by their enclosure again. Kai was grooming Luna, patient and calm. Dr. Emerson watched from behind her camera, taking notes. "You know what strikes me most," the vet said quietly. "It's not that you saved his life. It's that you gave him one worth living." Elena didn't answer. She was watching Kai's eyes, the same eyes that had once been empty, now warm, steady, and alive. He looked at her, and in that look was everything words could never say. That evening, the desert was painted in orange and rose. Elena finished her rounds, locking the gates, checking the lights. When she reached Kai and Luna's enclosure, they were curled together in their den, barely visible in the fading light. Kai opened one eye, saw her, and closed it again. No fear, no tension, just recognition, trust. Elena smiled. Tomorrow would bring new rescues, new deadlines, new calls from overcrowded shelters asking for the impossible. But tonight, for this one night, there was peace. She looked up at the sky, 1,000 stars shimmering above the desert, and she thought of all the animals she couldn't save, all the ones whose 72 hours had run out. Then she thought of Kai, alive, loved, and free in his own way. And she whispered to the wind, a prayer more than a statement. Every life matters, every hour matters. Sometimes just showing up, even when it's too late, is enough to turn 72 hours into a lifetime.